if there's anything retributive about something like this, it's not going to work. If there's anything that's crusading about something like this, it's not going to work.
Welcome to Everything Hertz. My name is Dan Quintana from the University of Oslo, and I'm here with James Heathers from Cypherskin. James, I just saw that you were on a panel at the Computational Research Integrity Conference. What is this conference? What did you talk about?
Well, I talked about computational research integrity, Daniel. I talked. This is. I wish I had more time to be involved in a conference like this. I'm sandwiched, but I was in full grant writing mode until very, very late last night, which means I'm shattered now. Wasn't available yesterday, and all the work I should have done over the past week is something that I have to finish today and tomorrow. So a good time. I mean, I'll definitely make time for a panel on something like that, but you're asking me what a conference is about, and I can't go to it, and it's killing me. I don't know, man. I'm just trying to hang on.
What was the panel on?
Well, the panel was myself and Jennifer Byrne, for the author of the Blaster tool, Seek and Blast, and Amit Chowdhury, who's done some really interesting work in image manipulation detection. And I was talking about all our tools, myself and the erstwhile Dr. Brown, and everything that we've done. Everything that they've done is substantially more computational and a lot cooler than everything I've done. But we've done enough of it that people occasionally ask me for my opinion. It's good panel. It's a shame. I always wish that for a Q&A session, and anyone who's out there who organises a conference, I'd seriously consider this. Send round a short amount of stimulus material for the panel itself and a description, and then open the taps and just let everyone ask questions right from the get. Because, I mean, I tried to, I got my 7-minute introduction was 8.5 minutes because I'm not really capable of super following the clock. Like one single digression and you blow your time. And everyone else goes a bit over, and suddenly your hour for talking to people is turned into 20 minutes. And I want to talk to the people who turned up. That's the benefit of, I mean, you've got to take digital rather than in-person things have got benefits. And one of them is it's a lot easier to facilitate a discussion with 80 people because you've got the possibility of doing synchronous and asynchronous stuff without people standing up and fucking queuing up behind microphones like clowns and the rest of that. So I prefer heckling from the cheap seats. If I'm capable of it myself, why would I deny that pleasure to others, you know?
We, in this episode, are going to talk about something which, a bit of a brouhaha, which came up about a week or two ago. And this was in relation to this transparency leaderboard, which was proposed by Curate Science. And essentially, this Curate leaderboard collects the results of a so-called transparency audit for a body of research. And in this example, they were doing it for 10 researchers. And to give you a bit of background, in case you didn't catch this, there was 3 components which made up the scores for this leaderboard. Firstly, are your articles open access? And I think it's important to say that this isn't a preprint or an author-accepted manuscript does not count in this leaderboard.
A preprint doesn't count?
No, not for the leaderboard.
Okay, go on.
It has to be an open access article. Second bit, open data with exceptions for confidentiality reasons. And third, basic disclosures. So this includes competing interests, and they use PLOS's policies for what constitutes a competing interest, which is sensible, and whether you declare your funding sources. And so, yeah, instead of looking at individual papers, authors are rated on their body of work, and you're assigned a rating, which is a percentage of your articles that fulfill these 3 transparency categories. And if less than half of your articles reaches criteria, then you do not meet the Curate Science Transparency Standard. So, for instance, if your work gets audited, then you are given the opportunity to check and verify the results. And there was an interesting thread on Twitter with one of the researchers saying that, hey, I'm the leaderboard, and I was contacted to do this. And I never agreed to it, but it took me a lot of time or took my students a lot of time to verify this. So essentially, this first leaderboard was, I think it was 10 researchers, more of a pilot example, but the website mentions they will be beginning random audits soon on researchers. And so there was a lot of talk on Twitter about this. And now that I've laid it out there, I want to get your initial thoughts on this transparency leaderboard, James.
How many times have you been asked to comment on this since this whole flaming shit show happened, Dan?
A lot of times, both privately and also Hertz. We got a lot of requests both publicly and also with DM going, are you going to talk about this thing?
Yeah, well, it shows how organised. I don't get any requests to talk about it on the podcast. Well, I've been asked for my opinion 4 times that I can remember. Look, let me start with a basic principle of how to do a thing in public space, right? When you want to do a community initiative where you roll in, you expect people to get interested, or you expect other people to give you money, and you hope that you gain some kind of momentum. That momentum is social. Yeah? If everyone agrees it's a good idea, and academics are 2 things in general. 1, legendarily hidebound when it comes to systems and the way that their work is structured. The legacy hangover within a lot of areas of academia is substantial, much bigger than many other places. The second thing they are is contentious. Anything comes up, and a lot of the time people tell you exactly where they can shove it. So, tough crowd. And what that means is everything I just said goes double. If you release something and everyone tells you it's shit by definition. Yeah? You can't get away from it. It doesn't matter if you like them. It doesn't matter if you agree with them. If you say, I'm going to start a social movement, and everyone in the social throws a half brick at you and then goes to hide behind the showers, it's not going to work. Full stop, head of story. So let's start with the fact that when you do that and it's ineffective and you want it to work, why do you want it to work? Is it because it's supposed to be helpful for everyone? Or is it a little bit more like, eat your greens? I feel like this is a good idea, so it needs to happen. Right? And again, I'm going to reiterate it because it bears repeating. If you're trying to do a community initiative and the community doesn't like it, it isn't a good initiative. Okay. Have we got that out of the way? It's so bone idle fucking obvious. You don't get to double down. Unless we're talking about something that's rigidly empirical. You don't get to double down on, well, I think it's a good idea. You're asking people to participate. You're asking people to identify with it. You're asking for a lot of a collective time, maybe small amounts per person, but a great amount in aggregate. People will do that if it's explained to them properly. It seems like it's delivered with the right intent. Whether or not it is any of these things is a separate question. Whether or not it feels like it's designed for a good reason. So that leads you to, and I saw a lot of people throwing rocks at this. Some of it I didn't even understand. But like I said, until 1:30 last night, I've been on grant time. And grant time means the grant exists and everything down to my other personal hygiene factors doesn't. So a lot of people get the absolute flaming, screaming shits with how this was handled. Why? You tell me. You're going to have a better idea.
people don't like the idea that they are getting audited on criteria that they never agreed to in the first place.
So like the REF framework. Or like the Australian University Academic Journal ranking thing, where you split journals up into tiers depending on how popular the government thinks they are.
Yeah, I mean, no one agreed to that, and no one necessarily agrees to what. Yeah,
or too. Or alt metrics. I don't like the way that I don't like any of these things. You know that. I actively dislike any and all attempt to metricize stuff. I mean, but some of it's necessary past a certain point. Doesn't mean I have to like it. Fuck off.
But the difference is you never signed up for these things. But if you're applying for a grant, which you've been doing, part of that is agreeing to a certain set of conditions. Most grant agencies will actually have an actual audit. This is typically a financial audit, but also an audit of did you do or are you doing what you say you were going to do?
Which are in the T&Cs of the thing that you sign after they agree to give you the money. It's part of a negotiation.
Yeah, of course. But you know before you actually start doing your research that this is what you agreed to. And although people might not enjoy the time taken to actually run these sort of audits, you're just going to go, hey, that is something that I have to do and it's something that I agreed to. But the difference here is that these people people are worried that they're going to be audited on these standards that they didn't agree to. And I think time and time again, we've come back to the same thing in that somebody takes something which is or maybe standard in one field or one subfield, but doesn't necessarily apply to different fields. And one thing which I find really puzzling is the fact, and you sort of picked up on this as well, is that preprints are not considered open access articles, or author accepted manuscripts are not considered open access articles, and already you've got a situation.
It's only OA published. Well, frankly, you're going to end up with a class distinction on that. And also, let's say you audit me. What are you going to do with all my preprints? What are you going to do with all my preprints that are open by definition, where the data is available?
It doesn't count.
So I get no open credit. For full
0%.
Full transparency, data available, code available, preprints. Some of which have, I don't know, fucking dozens or 100 or something citations, so they don't count now.
Yeah, and that's more transparent than other articles.
Of course, it's fucking transparent. Obviously,
like you said,
if you do work on anything critical, and obviously I'm talking about critical stuff that I've done, like you don't have choice. There's absolutely no option. I mean, if I did that, think about error detection. It's got some not particularly tenuous connection with what auditing consists of. You're turning up unwanted, picking over someone's stuff against their will. I mean, in general, at a minimum, they've made a colossal error of calculation. We don't need to go through the laundry list of things we've found that eventually turned out to be really problematic. But I mean, you see a sort of natural parallel between these two things, yeah. But when you do that, you've got to have really good really good ability to ask in the first place. So there's a few things I did pick up on this that I really don't understand. One is, why does this take a long time? I feel like I could do. I mean, there's a dozen researchers, right? And there was a few, like 10, 20 papers that they did, right? I feel like like one person working really hard could reproduce the whole thing in a day.
Well, one part of it is partly automated. There is actually an R package which can go through and see whether you have reported some sort of conflict of interest statement. But I mean,
if it's that easy, right? Rather than picking specific people, why didn't they just start with aardvark and go down? Why would you choose people?
Someone's already done that in terms of conflict of interest.
Oh,
there was but I mean, look, yeah, but they wanted to do this was more of a proof of concept. This is what the leaderboard looks like for. They obviously picked people which were prominent within. This is very psychology centric, but prominent within psychology to go. These are the people that you know. And for these people that you probably know, these are the metrics for these people.
Okay, well, yeah, but here's the other thing. You choose a dozen papers, right? I mean, are they a dozen papers in the last 5 years? I would bet they were pretty different for a dozen papers in the last 10 years, a dozen papers in the last 40 years. So it's supposed to be an accurate reflection of right now, going back a certain number of years.
Yeah, and look, they pick this 5-year threshold, but it doesn't necessarily reflect. It doesn't reflect that different research fields have different timescales. What about longitudinal research, where you bloody submitted your ethics 10 years ago, and you're following a cohort of kids? You can't go back. Look, I think this is one of the main issues.
Yeah,
you can't go back in time.
Yeah, you get your TARDIS and you go back and you prepare a separate set of forms,
and that's what you change. I think that is one of the biggest issues here. Is let's go back to this grant funding institution issue where they might say, hey, part of our condition is that you post your articles online, and then they find out you're not doing it. And then they say, hey, you're not doing the thing, and you can easily address it, and you can address the issue. Same sort of thing with people that aren't complying with clinical trial registries. If someone or an organization notices you're not doing that, then you go and you change that thing. But the problem with this is that you're being marked on a thing that you did 5 years ago that you cannot change. You can't go back and address this. It's very difficult.
Hang on. You said you can't go back and address this, right? Then why did you say that case before? I said we'd come back to this. Why did you say that case before? It took someone who didn't agree to participate a ton of time. Why would it take you any time at all? You get an email and you go, okay, well, have fun. And then someone goes through and evaluates everything that's available, right?
No. So the reason that I say it took time is that somebody did the audit, and then they emailed the researcher going, we did this audit, and we would like to give you the opportunity to check the veracity of our audit. Yeah, and then what happened was, according to the researcher, they said they were told if they didn't comply, that would be at the bottom of the leaderboard, which is, that was very chilling.
I mean, look, I know a lot of people don't think like me, but even if there's obviously aims in here that are very aligned with like everything we've talked about over the last 4 years, honestly, my first impulse would be to say, fuck your leaderboard. No, I don't want to play. Like, put me on a piece of toast and call me a poached egg. Put me last on the fucking thing. Because that looks coercive. Yeah? And okay, so I think I've just answered my own question. So presumably that work, when you say, it takes a lot of work, was like going and providing new COI statements? Or, I mean, how do you get those into journals?
Exactly. No, when I'm saying work, the work is verifying what the audit came up with. So it might say, for this paper, people do. But hey, like, James, people aren't like you, believe it or not.
Dan, I'm well aware of that. It's just sort of, I mean, you
look, the time taken was checking. The time taken was checking whether anything that was reported in terms of the COI, or the fact that there's no open data, or there's no good reason for open data, is accurate. So what they do is they give you the opportunity to potentially correct what they did in their audit. It's an effort to include the researcher to make sure that there's no errors. That's what I'm talking about when it says that it takes time for the researcher. And that's what one of the researchers recounted on
it's only
online.
A dozen papers. How long is it going to take you to check that?
Yeah. I mean, it's people are busy. So
hang on. Was it the opportunity to? No, but you can't upload a preprint. I don't understand.
That's the thing,
I don't understand. Well, look, if you obviously everyone resents you making work for them. My experience with error detection has taught me anything that everyone resents you making work for them, honest or otherwise. Usually, fucking otherwise.
Yeah, and you can't fix any of these things. You can't make your article open access. You can't.
It feels like with a completely different framework. Like something like this is perfectly straightforward. I mean, the thing is like, what are you adding that people don't know? It's just assigning a value to the researcher. It's. I mean, I know everyone's big into kind of social castigation these days. But it feels like, I mean, it would only be normative if you managed to do something like this with a lot of people within a subfield. You know, you think about how much this stuff changes between clinical research and non-clinical research, between life science research and social science research. You remember when we had Chris Jackson on, and he's saying, I can't release any of my data because it all belongs to fucking Exxon. Yeah? And like, we had to ask them nicely for geological data in the first place. We can't give away their survey results. It could affect their share price. It could be picked up by Shell. It's proprietary stuff. Now, he's a very genuine guy who's very committed to excellent research practices. I get the impression that if you open data scored fucking whatever audit him, he'd get a 0.
Mm.
But then the other thing is all the other geologists would get a 0 as well. Yeah?
So the field,
Seismologists probably wouldn't, because as far as I'm aware, a lot of that data comes from government sources. Right? So you just say, I downloaded it from here. You don't even need to put the data up yourself. You just give people a fucking link and a bunch of parameters. So open code would be a lot more important than actual open data. So look, this is something like this. It only becomes normative. It only has any sense of intrinsic fairness when you don't start twisting people's arms behind their back, and when you do it to a whole bunch of people. It just feels fucking lazy to choose a dozen. Also, you want to lead a social movement, bring everyone. Look, you can see, this is one of those really frustrating things where you can see if you change the kind of, if you swap, well, most of the parameters out, frankly, the fact that it could work in some context.
How?
Sorry?
How do you think this could work? What would you change?
Well, I'd have, I wouldn't be choosing individual people to make sure that the thing hit and splashed. That feels, I mean, it feels targeted. Because it is. How do you pick them? You probably don't want to start with. But you want to start with normative observations across the whole thing, not sort of, okay, so it's you over there, Terry, your practices are shit according to a definition that I don't really like either. So I'm going to see your fish-looking lips about to move. Give me a second. The other thing is I don't know why. I mean, look, presumably it's a resource thing and it takes time and money. But something like this, it's got to be at least somewhat automated. You need a lot of data before it's pooled. You need a lot of data before it's informative. Otherwise, you're picking like 10 papers from the lady down the road, and then you're breaking her kneecaps over something she may not have been able to control. So, you know what I mean? You're coming out trying to make a splash, I suppose. I mean, I understand where it's coming from, but I mean, I saw so much. There's so much chat about it. Everyone lost their mind. Obviously, look, there's a lot of perceptions about this. Is the problem with giving everything a name and turning it into a fucking club. We can't just have practices and ideas. Everyone has to get little hats and rally behind the center of an idea. You know, and the moment you have a tendency within that, everything goes to shit. That's what George Carlin used to say. I loathe and despise the groups that people belong to. You know, love people, hate it when they form a club. Had a point. Look, it's not, honestly, I also don't know, like, what's it trying to solve? Is it just trying to get oxygen on? But I mean, it's also something with a great deal of collective attention. You know, is the paper open access? It's a fucking 15-year argument about like whether or not things should or shouldn't be open access. And then you cut out the only decent innovation in the last sort of 5 to 10 years when it comes to getting people access to shit that they paid for. You always strategize things like this in your head once you get past the idea that it didn't work. Or how could it work? But honestly, what it really comes down to, like anything like this, is the product of consensus building. It's a product of lots of other people thinking it's a good idea. Yeah, go out, canvass people, convince them. A lot of the time, it's not really about the center of the idea. There's probably a lot of ways to do most of the alleged innovations that we've had within the ability to produce empirical shit and put it in digital space. But it's all about people. And if you want to change it, you have to start with consensus building. You drop it like a hot rock and you point it at someone. I mean, this is... I don't want to sound like a fucking hypocrite, because obviously I've done that with people. People I've done that with like long published histories of papers that I think, frankly, are not built from real data. There's people who are, you know, in some very straightforward sense, actually doing fraud, financial or otherwise. So it is hard. It is hard to do anything like this. And if you can't get out of your own way when you try and do it, it's going to be a problem. Right? If there's anything, because I mean, people will sniff that out eventually. If there's anything retributive about something like this, it's not going to work. If there's anything that's crusading about something like this, it's not going to work. You're not actually offering people anything that they can have except a thing that has. I mean, if you do well, I mean, you're offering them you're not offering them a negative proposition. Well, don't get in trouble according to me because you haven't done a thing. You know, what do you give them if they do well? A fucking badge, a little hat,
a badge.
Yeah,
a badge and a widget,
yeah,
James.
Do you get mailed the copy of the latest Daniel Boone paperback? You know, do you get $5 off at Bed Bath and Beyond? It's like so participating, presumably, you know, like being in it, is an exercise in avoiding criticism. I mean, read the fucking room. Everyone's pretty trashed. Like, in general, there's a big sort of wet blanket fog of fatigue and general shittiness that's descended over everything, in case you hadn't noticed. I was sitting here, Dan, back in Boston this afternoon, and there's a neighbor with a leaf blower, and I have these fantasies about going out and sticking it in his mouth and inflating him like the blueberry girl from Willy Wonka. You know, and then poking him with a hat pin, seeing whether or not he pops. And I was sitting here thinking, holy fuck, when quarantine started last March and spring was just breaking in the US, I was sitting on this couch being angry with that guy making that fearsome racket while everyone's trying to work from home. You know, you don't even have that many leaves. He's probably quicker with a rake.
Yeah.
Right. And I realised that was a fucking year ago. It's really not a good time to put lit matches under people's fingernails.
If you're liking what you're hearing, there are a few ways that you can support the work that we do on Everything Hertz. First, you can throw some of your spare change to us each month, $5 to be exact, and you'll get access to a bonus episode every single month. There's also a $1 tier that will get you access to the Everything Hertz newsletter and the occasional bonus episode. Second, we've got a merch store where we sell hoodies, shirts, and coffee mugs, which is our most popular thing that we sell, so you can tell everyone that you listen to the best science podcast in the world. Third, you can tell your friends about the show by sharing links to episodes on social media. James and I love seeing these posts. For links to our Patreon page and merch store, check out the show notes. Do you think this would work if this was done on an institutional level or a journal level?
Okay, you do it on an institutional level. Well, I mean, they've all got the similar kind of basket of a similar kind of basket of disciplines and areas. I think it's going to be fucking flat Stanley unless you have a couple of places that are significantly more in support of something than otherwise. There's probably also going to be a lot of differences between countries because there are people who can just afford to pay open access fees.
Yeah, the open access stuff,
So, I mean, all you're really reproducing is the kind of knock-on effects of the problem that some people have money and some people don't. Some people work in open areas where sharing everything is normal and encouraged, and other people don't. You're just saying, well, that already sucks. Let's see it again from a different angle. You know? It's like walking around a car crash to get it in 3/4 and quarter profile. It's like, stop taking fucking photos and see if anyone in there's bleeding.
I think it also is an issue for people who don't have as much power within science. So if your article was up there, if you were audited, let's say, and you were 7th author on an article, and there's not much you can do, especially if you're an early career researcher, when it comes to speaking with the senior researcher going, hey, why isn't this data open? This leaderboard exacerbates issues with people that cannot afford open access. But one other area in which it also exacerbates inequalities is early career researchers who don't necessarily have a big say in how research is conducted, both in terms of open data or controlling. What happens if author number 2 doesn't declare her conflicts of interest, yet author number 3 is getting penalized for that?
When people think about COIs as an issue, they don't think about the third author who's a part-time graduate student just so happens to work down the road in some capacity against whatever. We're talking about moneyed interests generally. Yeah? We're talking about memberships of societies that are, not evidence-based. So say you were doing something, there's all this fuss in the US recently. This I did see, about this lad. It looked like someone had tumble-dried an Amish, scruffy-looking beard, head with all funny angles in it, really weird-looking guy. Went to a fucking series of massage parlors and shot them up, right? And then everyone went, oh, he was sexually frustrated. As if that's in an area where if you're single, you've been sitting in your house for the last year, afraid to go out to a bar and talk to people because of the death, and this guy's sexually frustrated. Oh, fuck me. So if you were a member of the, oh no, that's perfectly okay, all of this makes sense, pornography is destroying the fabric of reality itself, and it's freezing the oceans like Ice 9, and it's going to blot out the sun for some reason. If you're a member of that society, and you just so happen to be publishing empirical data that just so happened to show that that was a good idea, you'd want to know, right? And these people came out of the woodwork when something like this happens, And they said there's little associations of people who believe a whole variety of things that are not supported by evidence broadly. So you want to know that, right? You want to know about money. You don't want to don't want those the funny but 100% true conflict of interest statements. Is basically my conflict of interest is the fact that maybe I won't get tenure if you don't publish this. So we'll leave that to one side. That's some great example of some lad who put that in all his papers. That's very funny. Because that's the biggest fucking conflict of interest at all. This stuff doesn't continue to exist.
Or even just an intellectual conflict of interest.
I won't get paid or promoted. Here's a good conflict of interest statement for you, Dan. 15 years ago, I came up with this idea on a whim. It's unaccountably popular. The grad student who actually did all the work has left years ago, and now I'm forced to defend it because I find myself publicly identified as its intellectual godfather. What's a good COI for you? I bet there's
that COI would be on so many papers.
There's a few people in the social sciences who would walk the fuck away from things that they came up with if you just said, look, no harm, no foul. If your whole career is built around an idea that is just cockamamie bullshit, and frankly, you're sick of it, and you're fighting a losing battle with everyone who tests it and finds it coming up wanting, almost as if science was hard or something. If we said no harm, no foul, you can walk away from that right now. There's plenty of people who'd go, oh, thank God, I don't have to push that barrow anymore. That's a fucking COA.
We should have a 6 month period, a grace period where you can just go nuts.
Where you're allowed to change your mind.
Change your mind
in public without your your identifiable intellectual centre being called into question.
It's like the loss of confidence project.
A moratorium on judgment for uncertainty.
That's it.
Yeah.
Let's do a leaderboard on that, James.
Just go start doing leaderboards. Look, I don't want to be. I don't know the fucking background. Look, maybe something like this is offered in good faith. Maybe it seems like a good idea to start with. But I'll say this. There are a fucking million. I have talked to, how long have I been out? 9 months. I reckon I've had a dozen conversations with someone in a small company trying to do something in and around academic space. They never call me a second time because this is what I tell them. It's really, really hard to have an idea good enough that you're going to be offering someone something that they can jump on, because this is all about these are small, collected organizations, not run by big platform sorts of people, not going after big platform sorts of approaches. Your primary job is to convince people that it's in their best interests, and it's in the best interests of the global scientific infrastructure that whatever you're proposing is implemented. That's your primary job. So to get the fucking code to work, if it's something that people really want, and you should know by asking them, not by trying to read their fucking minds, which is a pretty basic version of how you start a small organization, by doing research. And I tell these people, there is the bodies within the valley of death of people who tried doing something like this as their own unpaid initiative, as something funded from a grant, as a small organization, as a non-profit, or just a group of mates who were just happened to be sitting around one day, and Brenda has a good idea and we all go with that. History's littered with the fucking corpses of these ideas. And it's more so than in other areas. Honestly, there's no figures. In fact, the whole thing of, so many businesses doing this fail within the first year, all those figures, I looked up the official government version, and I have to do a full analysis on that at some point in time, because all of those figures are bullshit. It's equating things like software startups in San Francisco with like some lad who suddenly fancied he'd start doing landscaping on the side and started an LLC and bought a truck in Modesto, California.
Huge difference.
Yeah, big differences. They just go small businesses. Could be a bodega, could be a bakery, could be a fucking SaaS company. They're all small at some point, right? They bang them all in together in the official statistics. It's a mess. And people try and scare you with this stuff when you begin a startup. Oh, do you know how many of them fail? They tell you some statistic. You look it up. It's never fucking accurate. The point being, that's what I continually tell people, and everyone's convinced that their idea is better, and everyone's always wrong. Yeah? If you're in this space, regardless of how you're coming at the project, commercial or otherwise, academic or otherwise, what you really need to do is make a really good study of all the things that fucking worked. And what you'll find is that there's commonalities between those. Strong commonalities. You're either saving people time, you're either removing complications within a process, or are you making someone money? So let's go through some schemes and initiatives that worked. Registered reports, Publons, Site.ai. Doing well so far? Are all of these good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Zotero and Mendeley to a given value of small. Okay. Let's think of a few more.
OSF.
What's that?
OSF.
Yeah.
Open Science Framework.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, according to the US government, there's still, you could grow it 5 times and it's still technically a small business, at least according to the Small Business Innovation Research definition. What are they? We're forgetting about our friends and former partners at Prolific.
Prolific, yeah.
Yeah? Okay, what are these things doing? They're all providing people with something that they want. Now, I've used all of these, and they're fucking good. I haven't used a registered report in the fact that I ever got to do one. But, I've given people advice on them. I've gone upside down around the way and up the arse on them. Honestly, we've had Chris on here to talk about it. Do you know how you get that started? Do you know how you get a scheme like that started? You be Chris and you go the entire way around what seemed like all of the UK and continental Europe, continually talking about it, bringing people on board, trying to form a community, trying to get people to agree that it's a good idea, talking to funders, talking to journals, talking to editors, talking to deans and important people at universities, talking to senior academics, talking to your colleagues, etc., etc., etc. All right, why does Site work as a business? Because it's fucking handy. If I'm reviewing something new now at my job, I use Site all the time. Here's a list of all the things that have cited it. Even just click on it and here's all the context in which it was cited. The amount that you can tell just from those 30 words before, 30 words after, or whatever it is amazing. Everyone always knew that there were huge problems with data collection on the internet, and it's never going to be perfect. But Prolific comes along, and they say people want to do digital research, and you can control for the fact that there's people out there in click farms just making MTurk stuff up for fucking fun and money. Yeah, we can make that go away. Publons, no one's ever rewarded for doing so. You're solving problems for people. Now, I'm not saying that every community initiative has to make money and be super helpful, but it's providing a tangible thing for people. It's not, let's have the judgment initiative. Let's have the shaming initiative. There's enough of that on the fucking internet. I don't think you need to formalize it and turn it into something. So let's think about how that could work. Okay, top of the head, here's a fun idea. Let's say we pick 100 people and we go through all this shit.
Random or?
Whatever. Whoever turns up,
okay.
Last person you got an email from, the guy down the hall, a dog named Boo, doesn't fucking matter. And we get a normative thing. And then we publish the distribution and then we say, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to take everyone above 90% and we're going to put their interview on this website and we're going to send them a fucking prize and we're going to call them on the telephone and we're going to ask them for their experiences with this thing and they're going to tell us why it's important to them and why it's easy in their field and we're going to put that on fucking YouTube and then we're going to talk about it. And then even if there's nothing to it, we're going to put these people on a pedestal. We're doing things that everyone agrees are viable. We're not going to judge anyone. We're going to find out the people who are doing it. I'm going to scream their names from a fucking mountaintop because they are doing extra work on top of what they're already expected to do, and they're doing it really well. And they're being and you know what? Maybe some of them are terse. Maybe some of them don't want to talk about it. Maybe some of them don't want to be your best friend. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is building a community full of people. And if they're talking to each other and going, this is really important to me, and this is why. And here are the actual benefits. And there you are turning up, actually displaying what one unexpected, although it may be, and not related to their profession in some direct sense, as it may be, but displaying a fucking benefit of what it is. And then you do that, and then you go to a funder, or you go to a government body, or you go to a non-profit, and you say, you're in this area, because they would be, presumably. Why don't we think about using this and having prizes for these people? Why don't we record all of their reflections and turn it into something and send it around? Why don't we find the youngest person on the whole fucking list and find out someone who became a grad student at 24 and wasn't so utterly devoted to their career that they forgot about how the broader scientific commons benefits from what they do? Okay, now we've done that. Now we've got a group of people that we've been really nice to because they've gone out of their way to provide assistive resources to other people. Now, Dan, is that a better idea than picking people at random and throwing rocks at them because they haven't done some shit?
Yeah, huge difference. You're building a community and you're getting people on board from the get-go.
Yes. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, it's not. Trust me, as someone who's attempted to judge people quite a lot, and I would stand, having said that, I would stand merely on my record of the vast majority of those people being in any academic or sometimes legal sense very worthy of judgment. In general, it's not a good idea. In general, it's not going to enamor you to people who are around you. Do you know what I hope they do? I mean, I don't know who the fucking... I think I got an email about it. I have 12,000 unanswered emails. I used to be at inbox 0. I'm at inbox 12,000. You believe that shit? My work email is at inbox 0. I hope that people don't look at this and think, well, the people who ran it are a bunch of assholes and they should all be thrown in the Indian Ocean and eaten by fucking hammerhead sharks. As much as, why didn't that work? That's the functional question that you ask. I mean, you try and keep the judgment to a minimum and you say, or at least we say, this is what my corporate life is like. Why didn't that work? Identify the problem. Don't kick anyone in the spuds. Figure it out. Why didn't it work? Well, it's about this particular aspect. Okay, let's address that particular aspect. There may be someone listening to this or someone else who's not listening to this. Let's not exaggerate our fucking listenership numbers. who is thinking of going into this area. Please fucking listen to what I'm telling you. It's not even a matter of you catch more flies with honey. More like you make more functional organizations with a basic appreciation of human fucking nature. And when you do it in an area where people are already burned out on contention and fucking plague and everything else, and you go, let's have a go and be difficult about it. Of course it's not going to work. You just, there's a point past which I wonder, I don't know how sincere this is. But I hope they're not just sort of running up a flag so everyone yells at them and they get a good story out of it, which is a very tired media tactic, basically, at this point.
Yeah. I
really should have looked more closely into this, but, man, and you can tell you're looking at me. How do I look, Dan?
Disheveled. More than usual.
I look like a bag of shit. And it's not the fault of this excellent Three Floyd Zombie Dust, one of my very, very favorite breweries. And I thought I wasn't going to like it because look, that's a Lich King on the can, yeah, and that's very metal. And when people start appealing to that side of my nature, I start to instantly distrust the fact that most of my beers have like austere labels with something unpronounceable and a thing in the middle of it that says like sour beer, and it's the best thing you ever had. And I rarely drink anything that has a Lich King on it, but god damn it, it is actually good. And it's well past 5 p.m, so I'm allowed. But like more than that, trust me, it's not the beer talking. It is. Look, it's a final thing. I hope everyone who thinks that this is a shit idea and they couldn't have done better. I hope everyone who and the people involved are assholes and whatever else, whatever the context is. I hope one day you get to experience the astonishing annoyance of trying to start anything with a kind of public identity from scratch. It gives you a lot more empathy for anyone doing this in any context, because it's fucking hard. And it's going to be a tremendous, ego blow to see what happened. I don't have any animosity over this, or maybe some continual frustration that people continually have good ideas in academic space. But they think that the good idea is enough. They publish a company like they're publishing a paper. They publish a scheme or an initiative like they're publishing a paper. You stick it out in the world and then wait 3 years and hope people cite it. It doesn't work like that. It's just people and empathy, and that's it. Yeah? Your idea doesn't even need to be that good. Oh, I've got the most transformative idea. Fuckity fuck. Think about how you're going to relate to the people around you before you go, this is the best idea and no one's ever thought of it, I'm the first. Because 1, you're not the first, trust me. 2, that's not how it's going to be judged and perceived. I've talked a lot, and it's partly because I've got the tired, voluble thing going on here. I don't want to roughshod on you, because this is actually the mechanics of this whatever are pretty interesting. There's a lot of shit hanging off the side of it, right? Tell us while I sit here and drink this beer what you think.
If you look on the website of Curate Science, you can see that in parts of it that the intentions are good in terms of wanting to increase transparency, and by putting together this thing, the idea is, or the original idea is that you would get this badge and you could put this on your website. And I think the vision for the idea for the concept of Curate Science is that some journals will eventually also adopt this to say this paper gets 90%, whatever, or this, or universities or funders would do this.
Sorry, I know I said you talk, but clarification, I thought this was binary. I mean, what is how do you get a percentage for an individual paper? I thought either it met binary criteria or it didn't. What am I misunderstanding?
Sorry, so I misspoke there. The idea would be that a particular researcher, whether it's on a funder level or an institutional level, would get a percentage, and that percentage is based on the amount of articles that would fulfill the criteria. So the original idea was to reward scientists and say, hey, you can put your hand up and say, I happen to agree with these benchmarks, and I think these benchmarks are good for my research and for what I'm doing. On my website, you can put the widget on to say this. And you know what? If you value these particular things and you think having a preprint, having an open access article is equitable, and that having open data is realistic for your research field, and that you're very happy to have stated your conflict of interest, then you can say those things. But all of a sudden, it seems to have more recently, it seems to have morphed into a stick of punishment that if you, and especially hearing these stories of a researcher being told, hey, if you don't comply with the audit.
Stories plural?
Story. There was one.
Oh, right.
There was one.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but look, there was only 10 researchers originally there, and this idea of highlighting people that haven't been doing the thing that you defined. So if you look at this leaderboard, there's one researcher who was below 50%, which is the threshold that they've decided is failing their criteria.
And they're in a different Australian undergraduate marking system where your fail is at 50%. It feels a bit fucking arbitrary, doesn't it?
Yeah, so they've picked 50%. So if this was we want to reward researchers and offer, look, this could have been another badge system. The thing is, we already have badges for open data, open scripts, but the difference with that is that's done by individual paper. But the idea is to make this something which is tied to a researcher, and it's just simply not going to work, considering that researchers have different needs, and you just can't have these global things for a particular researcher, and it's so psychology biased. It's just crazy. Like you said, with
maybe it's a psychology initiative. I don't think either of us know what the sort of focus of it was. But here's the thing, Dan. Could something like it work?
If it was purely a not pointing out things that have gone wrong, but simply allowing people to say, if you want to put this on your website that I score 90% on this arbitrary thing, then that's fine. But at least you can make it clear. This is you saying, this is what I think is important when it comes to transparency. Whether that would actually increase or improve research transparency over and above what's already been proposed, I really don't know. These things are not new, and frankly, researchers are sick of being ranked. Whether it's a H index, whether it's a gross number of publications or gross number of citations,
number of papers in journals with an impact factor over.
Yeah, exactly. People don't want to see this kind of stuff. So if I really like the approach that Open Science Framework or the Center for Open Science has done for introducing these norms, it's not just about, a lot of people think, it's all about rewarding these practices, but they take a step back going, how can you reward these practices if you can't actually make it easy? By making these things easier, both by providing the tools, but also by providing the education, people can go, hey, I can do this thing. This is something that I can do. If all of a sudden you jump like 4 steps to rewarding the thing without actually teaching people how to do it.
Yeah, build the infrastructure. Hire a software engineer.
We're going to wrap this one up. Thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back again soon. We've got a special guest coming in, a former guest of the show will be coming back for our next episode. So I hope you tune into that. But thanks for listening. See you later.